Welcome back. I'm your host, Christie Turley, and today I'm speaking with David McGlennen. He is a coach, consultant, and CEO of Impact Leadership, and we will be talking about his systematic approach for growth, the intention of a morning ritual, the light side and the dark side of being a high achiever, and the difference between ego-driven and intuition-led achievement. David McGlennen is a business growth guide who helps leaders learn to play the infinite game of business. He shows those leaders how to integrate their high desire for high performance, achievement, and growth while focusing on the things they value most. As an entrepreneur and family business owner for most of his life, he's made the mistakes and yet loves getting out of his comfort zone to learn and grow. He's coached and trained leaders around the world as far north as the Arctic Circle and has shared the stage with John C. Maxwell while training leaders in Paraguay, South America. He has been married for 32 years and is a father of 5 children living in the Pittsburgh region. He's a recovering triathlete and loves an active and healthy lifestyle. Please join me in welcoming David to today's episode. Welcome, David, to the show.
Thank you, Christy. I'm delighted to be here and honored.
I am glad you're here too. So let's dive in. You are a high achiever. You help other high achievers. What
Yeah.
makes you a high achiever? Where'd you get started? How did this start?
Oh gosh, it started early in my career, and probably even before that. What's interesting is I actually remember when I was probably in. I got to think a second here. I probably was like in 7th grade. I went to a jazz band concert at my local high school where I was going to be going in a couple of years. And I was in the balcony. I can tell you exactly where I was, right in the middle. I was in the balcony, and the jazz band, the first jazz band, so the top jazz band played. And I absolutely loved it. I was just really digging it. And I said to myself, I'm going to be on that stage. I'm going to be lead trumpet in that band. And I don't know why, but that's kind of why that's where, at least where I feel like it's almost started. And that's what happened. Actually, I worked towards that. I practiced an awful lot, and became the lead trumpet in that high school jazz band. And so I think that kind of started it. And then as I grew and went into college, I just felt like I had this insatiable drive to achieve, and I became a partner with my dad. I was super goal oriented. I had goals written out. Wanted to be a millionaire by the time I was 30, and all of these materialistic kinds of goals, very immature. But I think that started the ball rolling, as it were.
So interesting that you started in jazz. I don't know if you've ever reflected on this before. I'm gonna pose something to you.
Yeah, sure.
So I always find it interesting with my clients or people that I know, like when they tell me their origin story, I always see seeds of wherever they got their start, or well, you mentioned jazz, and
Yeah,
where they are today. And the thing
yeah,
that occurs to me about jazz is it has a rhythm about it that is not predictable sometimes,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I wonder if you've ever made that leap or used a metaphor, a jazz metaphor, in explaining what you do for clients, because
That's
I bet
so
you
interesting.
that you're
Yeah,
using your intuition. There's one thing's for
totally.
certain. It's uncertain, right?
Yeah,
If it's
exactly
certain,
right.
it's
Yeah,
uncertain.
right.
And this idea of improv,
Yes.
how does this play in? Get it? Play in. Love the
I love
puns.
it. I love
How
the
does this
puns.
play in?
I love it.
I cannot resist being punny.
Oh, I love
How
it.
does
That's
this
so
play
great.
into your current line of work?
Gosh, Christy, that's really interesting. And I don't know that I've ever thought about it before, but it makes perfect sense. I mean, when you said it, there was something within me that was like, Yeah, absolutely. So I do a lot of improv right now. I mean, anytime I'm with a client, I never know what's going to come at me. In coaching situations, in group coaching or my emerging leader groups, I don't know what's going to happen. I kind of have an idea. I might have a path or a pattern, but I don't really know. And sometimes it ends up in a whole different place than I really originally planned. So that whole jazz idea, it kind of works, and it's pretty interesting that you made that connection. I never have, so totally get
Well,
it.
and that goes to, we can be blind sometimes to our own amazingness. And think
Yeah,
about, there was
absolutely.
something about that jazz that
Yeah,
drew your soul to it. Like you were like,
no
I'm
doubt.
going to be that. I'm going to do
Yeah,
that. And it was like such this deep desire. And I want to just challenge you, like, cause I
yeah,
didn't know you
I
were going
love
to talk
it.
about jazz. Like, I didn't know that's where you
I
got your
didn't either.
start, you know? So,
Yeah, yeah,
um, we were improving. I would
yeah,
just challenge you to think about that. And is there some cool way that you can weave that into your brand
yeah,
somehow
yeah.
in your
I
messaging?
I think there is. Yeah, absolutely. I really do. And it's interesting because the whole, I mean, jazz and music has been a part of my life for a long time, and it makes me feel things, and it's I can I matter of fact, my son is a professional musician.
Hmm,
I just a week ago went to see him. Oddly enough, he's in a jazz band. He's actually in a professional big band, and he was
cool.
playing at a local grill that is a jazz club, or it's actually a music venue. And just hearing him evoked all kinds of emotions within me. And I think that music for me, and maybe even, yeah, jazz, is that that conduit for feeling and for emotion and being able to kind of put things together. And so what's interesting is, I guess, yeah, was as I'm thinking about it and maybe even processing out loud,
Yeah.
that I'm putting things together for clients, and I may not necessarily know where it's going to end up, but I'm improvising, and I'm asking this question, and I'm bringing these people together, and I'm helping them to process. And so it is a bit of a creation process. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think that's
You're the
it's
conductor and you're teaching
yeah,
other people to be wonderful conductors of their own
yeah,
orchestra, their own symphony, right? And
absolutely,
so,
yeah,
yeah, I think there's so many ways you can go with that. So,
yeah,
yeah,
for
you know
sure.
my number if you want help with that. But I
Absolutely,
love that. I love that stuff
yeah,
because I feel like that makes you so much more unique. It makes your
yeah.
brand stand out. It makes it memorable,
Yeah, for
especially when you
sure.
can infuse symbolism into your messaging and your story.
Yeah.
It helps people remember who you are, your value, and how you can help them. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
so one of the things about your story, we kind of talked a little bit before, and I did a podcast with
Yep,
your podcast, so you guys have to check out your
absolutely.
podcast as well. We'll put the link in the show notes. So you talk a lot about, I mean, what you do is you help people grow their business, you help them
Mhm.
grow themselves so they can grow their business.
Yeah.
One thing that doesn't get talked a lot about is the crash and burn that can
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, so
And
true.
you talk about this freely. You know, you've crashed and
Yeah.
burned several times. I know a lot of people
Yeah.
that don't want to admit that,
Yep.
especially a lot of gurus that talk about growing
Yeah.
businesses or scaling a business. They don't want to talk about the failures, but it's inevitable, right? Especially if you're
Absolutely.
growing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Like you
Sure.
mentioned, you were blind to these signs
Yeah.
before you crashed and burned, and blind to some of the signs that kept you working in your business and slaving away when you
Yeah.
thought it would be so fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like the dark side to achievement, I think. And
Mhm.
not too many people talk about it. And, for me, one of the things that happened is I got involved in a startup business, which was amazing. It was great. I loved being a part of it because that part of me, that achievement part of me, was just came alive. But as I got into it, and as I got focused on that business and my part of that business, um, I it's kind of like I put blinders on and I missed a lot of things. And it really, it didn't even occur to me until I call it my midlife awakening. It's like I had this moment in time when I recognized how much I was missing in life by going so fast and so furious and being solely focused on doing rather than the being. And I really came to this point where I knew something had to change. And as fate, luck, whatever you want to call it, would have it, about this time when I was beginning to have some of this awakening and really having my eyes opened, the company that I was working with brought in private equity to be able to take the company to the next level. Sometimes we have to do that in business. We need some infusion of cash to be able to go to that next level. And again, the achievement part of me, I was like, yes, this is great. But something really told me that I really needed to sell part of my shares of the company that I had. And that would then somehow maybe like open things up for me. And I couldn't even, I'm articulating it now, but because it's in hindsight, but then I didn't really know. I just knew that I knew I needed to sell part of my shares. Well, I did that. And what that did for me is over the next year, I really did a lot of just introspection and a lot of thinking and a lot of journaling. And I came to the place where I knew that I needed to leave that business and start the business that I'm in today. And interestingly enough, as we're recording this, my 6-year anniversary is coming up in July. And so uh, that process helped me to see some of the things that I hadn't seen before, like, my kids needed me. My kids were growing up, and I was missing a lot of different things. It's interesting. So one of the eye-opening experiences that I had, I was on the tarmac. Actually, I wasn't even in the aircraft yet. I was in LaGuardia Airport, know exactly which airport. I was waiting to come home, and I was on a business trip coming home, and I was trying to get home in time to see my son's concert, the same one I was just talking about. And all of a sudden, the lady on the PA says, "Hey, we're going to have a little delay. There's a slight maintenance issue, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, okay, well, long story short, it wasn't that long. We got in the plane and started taxiing out. The pilot came on and said, "Hey, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for your patience. Because of the delay, we're going to have a little bit of a delay in taking off, but sit back, relax. We're 34th in line to take off." And I'm like, oh my gosh, 34. I know what this means. And so in my mind, I'm just kind of projecting ahead. And long story short, I finally did get home, but I missed the first half of the concert, and that was in that moment that I thought to myself, something's got to change and something will change. And that's really when I made the decision to talk to our CEO and tell him what I've been thinking about and creating the business that I have today.
It's so important. I'm so glad you brought this up because the military actually has a saying that slow is smooth and smooth
Smooth
is
is
fast.
fast. Yeah.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think as high achievers, we value the quickness.
Yeah. Yeah,
And we
for
don't
sure.
realize this counterintuitive move to slow down, enjoy
Yeah.
life, enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel like in some ways I'm just now learning that, and it's, it takes a little time. I think achievers have to crash and burn sometimes. Maybe not all of them, but at least I did. And I had to really make a bold move and hit hit an email resigning my position and then starting, impact leadership consulting. So
Yeah, that takes guts, right? That takes a lot of
yeah,
courage to do that. And thank goodness you did, because
yeah.
your life would be totally different. You would be on a completely different trajectory.
So true. Yeah. I mean, you and I probably wouldn't have met. And
Right.
I think that there are certain points in our life when we look back, and even in the moment, we know that there's, for example, hitting send on that email to our CEO, even though I had had dinner with him, a couple of weeks beforehand, he knew what was going on. It wasn't official until I, I pressed send.
Yeah.
And when I pressed send, I went, oh, dear
What
Lord,
did I
what did I
do?
do? Oh,
Yeah, and
so
I think that's completely natural too, completely
yeah,
normal.
yeah,
Um, I'd like to go back to this part that you were mentioning in your story, how you said you had this intuitive guidance or your intuition speaking to you to sell the shares.
yeah,
What
yeah.
was the result of that? Like, was the timing critical?
It really was. I mean, the timing was really critical because what happened is the private equity came in, transaction closed. I did sell half of my shares, and from there, the business was missing. It started missing its goals and missing the sales goals and the numbers. Some of the pipeline didn't come to fruition, and so a year later, the I actually a year later was ready to start my business, and I told our CEO that I wanted to sell the rest of my shares just to kind of make a clean break. They actually were my first client. They were my first corporate client. So, but back to your question, like when I sold the second part of my shares to I think it was one of the board members at the time. Um, they weren't they weren't worth nearly as much because we had to go through some valuation and stuff, um and so the timing was impeccable. I only wish I would have sold all of them at the outset, but that would have probably set the wrong tone or the wrong message. But and even for me, what it helped me to be able to do was become debt free and pay off a lot of debts. And it set me up for being in a great position for my business financially.
That's amazing. Yeah. Sometimes, our intuition is very patient with us. It'll keep
Yeah,
reminding us until we listen
yeah,
or until the time has passed to
right,
listen. And
yeah,
I mean, in this case, it sounds like you sold half at the peak and
I did,
half
yeah,
at, maybe not as great of a time, but
right,
whatever.
you're right,
But I mean, that was integral, it sounds like, for your trajectory of where you're at. And
it was.
you practice what you preach. You help people become the best version of themselves.
Hmm.
This is what you say on your website so that
Yeah,
they can enjoy the best version of their life.
yeah,
And I mean,
yeah,
think about that time travel machine. If you had to go back into time and you
yeah,
chose a different path,
yeah.
would you feel
Oh
like that's
gosh,
really the best version? I mean, I feel like we're
yeah,
always at this critical juncture, like this critical choice between, the path by default and the path of like destiny or like this
right,
best version. So you have this
yeah,
systematic approach for this. And I would love to know more about like, what is that systematic approach to
yeah,
growth?
yeah. So it really is sitting down and looking at things like our morning rituals, our habits, because I'll often say we don't get our goals, we get our habits. And so when we think about the things that we're doing, that's kind of like the second step. And you already know this, but the be do have model, who
Mhm.
do we need to be so that we can do the things that we need to do and have the things we want to have. I really help my clients work through this. And the first place that we start is their morning routine, their morning ritual. What is it that they need to be in the morning? Who do they need to be in the morning so that they can set their day up right? So essentially, that's the first step. But then we evaluate every area of their life. And you've probably seen this before, but it's you take the kind of the wheel of life, and whether it's your financial, your spiritual, your health, and we talk through where they think they are on that wheel of life, scale of 0 to 10, and we make some assessments, and then we start with whatever area they feel like they want to start in, and then we'll go from there and begin to create their life the way that they want it to be. What do they want to look? What do they want it to look like? I have them do some visualization, have them do some journaling. And it's so funny because one of my clients is an emerging leader in a company that I work with. And when he even told me, he said, "Dave, when you told me to start journaling, I thought, no guy journals. Are you kidding me?" But he said, but I did it. And now I don't know what I'd do without it, because it helps me to process my thoughts, my feelings, the things that are happening to me. So really I look at, morning routines, morning rituals. I look at our habits. And a big thing for me is health, not just physical health, but spiritual health, emotional health. And I think it all plays together. And so I really just kind of walk through each of those areas of life with my clients and help them to be able to establish some healthy habits in those areas.
That is wonderful. Can you give an example, like not naming names? You got to keep things confidential.
Sure.
But like you mentioned, because we talk about intuition, that's a spiritual word, right?
Yeah,
When
right.
you talk about spiritual health or like some spiritual habits that maybe people have that aren't so great, and
Yeah.
then like what kind of habits do they then transform into? What are the good spiritual habits that they have? I mean, imagine the morning
Yeah.
ritual is one, right? But what else?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, and even part of that morning ritual, um, there are a lot of people who may even have kind of a morning ritual, but they don't really take the time to, let's say, pray. And if that's part of their practice, and actually um, taking the time and making the time to walk through that practice, and even preparing themselves to do that. I think that so often, some of the clients that I've worked with, they just jump in the car, they grab their coffee, they jump in the car, and they get going. And part of their ritual might be like throwing out a podcast. That's great, that's good, but they're starting their day with uh, not really intention. And so part of the ritual, part of the morning ritual, is just, what are your intentions? Write down 3 things that you intend for the day. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your
That was
question or
amazing.
not.
Yes. I think we can all relate to that because at some point in our lives we didn't have a ritual.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
maybe we still don't. And no
Yeah.
judgment. There's no
Right.
better time than the present, right? And
No doubt.
so can you share with us, like, what do you do for your morning ritual? Maybe that will give
Yeah,
some
sure.
people some ideas of maybe something they're not doing currently that they
Yeah.
could.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about my morning ritual is I actually like to kind of tweak it now and again. And
Yeah,
so,
I do too.
yeah. So the first thing I do is I come down to my office. I have my morning chair, my reading chair, and I will take some time just to meditate. And I find that first, like, few minutes of the day, or of the morning ritual, is kind of where I just like to observe my thoughts. I like to, like, find out what's coming up for me, what's passing through my mind. And so I take, sometimes it's only 5 minutes, sometimes it's 15 minutes of time just to really notice. And then I do some reading. So I'm a Christian, so I'll read the Bible. I have a Bible app. It's so convenient, and so I do my morning reading. Then I have my prayer time, and then I journal. And I'm a big journaler. I never used to be really consistent until the last probably 6 or 7 years, and I'm very consistent now. What I found about my journaling practice is that there's something magical that happens from the thought going out to your hand and writing it down. And I'm an advocate of a handwritten journal because I just think there's something magical about that. But but what I found is that as I've written things out, and sometimes it's stream of consciousness. Sometimes I'll even start like, I really don't know what to write this morning, but and then as I start to write that, then something else spurs, and then something else, and it leads to something else, and then I'll go back and I'll look at it and I'll go, wow, that was really interesting. Like I didn't like, where did that come from? So anyway, so my journaling practice, and actually I just started something about a month ago, another journal. Normally I just free form, but I actually tried this journal is specifically designed for men, called Mind Journal, and it's pretty cool because there's kind of a format. There's like 3 phases, and I think I'm just getting ready to start the third phase, but it's kind of interesting, and it just kind of switched things up for me. So after my journaling, then that's time for me to kind of put into my own mind. I'm an avid reader, so that's my reading time. So I have at least a book, if not several books that I've got going, and that's my reading time. And some days if I maybe I'm a little shorter on time, I'll compress that. But that's essentially my morning ritual.
I love that. It's so important to do. And
It is.
I do think that you can have different versions of the morning ritual. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be the same thing.
Right.
It can be a 5-minute version. You can have, how
Yep.
long do you take? It sounds like an hour.
Yes. So I'm in a different season of my life.
Yeah.
So sometimes it'll be 2 hours. I get up early, so I'm up by 5, if not before, and so I can take some time. And to me, that's the me time, and I would literally build it into my calendar. So if you look at my morning or my calendar, my planner, 5 a.m. it's my morning ritual, and it goes from 5 to 7. Occasionally I may have a meeting that starts at 7. I've got one senior executive that I coach that he likes to get started early, so I may stop it by 6:30. But yeah, so I take pretty much 2 hours, but it's my time. I've built it into my calendar. You don't have to do that. If you're listening, you might think, holy cow, I don't have 2 hours. Just remember, I'm in a different season of my life. And I think, you and I talked on my podcast about seasons. And so I think we have to recognize what season we're in. And if you only have 20 minutes, take the 20 minutes. But I would challenge you, get up earlier and make the time, because you'll never regret it. Some of my best moments are in the morning, and in that quiet, and even in the darkness. It's really special. That time is really special. And personally for me, that a lot of times that's when I hear from my intuition. That's when I'm hearing things, I'm feeling things and sensing things. And so and that's part of my journaling practice too. So anyway.
I love that so much. Everyone, take us up on this advice, please.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether it's 5 minutes or couple hours, like the investment in yourself, in your day, I feel like there's exponential rewards from that. Like that
Yeah.
little investment of time, I feel like for me, tell me your experience, but for me, I feel like I'm so much more productive. Like if I invest 15
Yes.
minutes, I feel like I could get 2 hours back in creativity and productivity. And
No
also
doubt.
just like being able to harness an opportunity I might not have seen because I noticed it in my morning ritual and I thought
Right.
about it and took that time to think about how my life is going, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Just to take an assessment. I
Mhm.
mean, I think that too often, again, people are moving at the speed of sound or the speed of light, and we got to slow down. And this is in a lot of ways, this is my conscious way to slow my achiever mentality down and to be able to really be intentional. One of the books that I read at that kind of at that pivotal time was Intentional Living by John Maxwell. And that book really kind of, there's something in it that just kind of clicked with me, that I needed to be a lot more intentional with the way I was living my life. And that for me, the morning ritual was the first way that I could say, look, this is my time. I'm carving this out for me because it's my life. And if I'm going to be any good for my family, my wife, my kids, I need to be the best for me, and I need to be the best me that I can be.
Yeah. And for achievers, this is good. This is a good benefit statement right now. You need to be the
Yeah,
best that you need that you can be,
absolutely.
right? Um,
Absolutely.
let's talk about achievement because I mean, I relate to this so much. I feel like I'm a high achiever, you're a high achiever. Let's
Yeah.
just talk between us high
Yeah.
achievers and all the other people that are talking or
Yeah.
here listening to us. Uh, there's a light side to achievement and there's a dark side to achievement.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Let's
sure.
talk about this. I mean, you can choose if you want to talk about light or dark first, but like,
Yeah.
what are some of these habits, good or bad, that achievers have?
Oh god. So the first thing that comes to my mind is just speed. Like for me, I've been a fast-paced person probably most of my life, and I think that can be a light side. I mean, that could be the good side. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
it gets stuff done, right? The dark side of that, though, is you miss a lot of things too. There's a lot of cool things that when you're going 100 miles an hour, they're flying by you and you miss them. And it's like, oh, wow, I never noticed that. So anyway, that's the first thing that kind of comes to
That's
my
so
mind.
good. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's important really to just ask yourself what is this costing me? Being an
Yeah.
achiever, what is it costing me?
Right.
There's some good parts to it. I get more done than most humans like you.
Right. Right. Yes,
And
exactly.
like Ferris Bueller had a quote and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's like
Oh, yes.
if you don't stop once in a while, I'm going to mess it up.
Look,
My
yeah, and look
husband can
around.
quote these
Yeah.
like off the top of his head, but if you don't
Yeah.
look around once in a while, you might miss it or something. And
Exactly.
that's exactly what you're saying. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
and thank
Yeah,
goodness you recognize that or you'd be on this other path too.
no doubt. Yeah. Well, and I think it helps to have a wife that helps me to see my blind spots. I mean, really, honestly, I mean, I think that that's how it's helped me to have a partner who does help me see my blind spots, but it's also been an awakening for me to listen to her as well. Because sometimes that dark side of the achievement is like, I have my eyes set on this goal, and that's all I want to see, and that's all I
Yeah.
want to hear. And you kind of tune everything out.
Hmm.
And so I've been, very blessed to have a wife that has helped me, sometimes gently, sometimes not so gently, which I needed.
Yeah,
So
that tunnel vision is a real thing for
it
sure.
is. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like there's this other question I want to ask you that just kind of came to me. And it's like,
Sure.
so achievement. We've talked about light and dark side. Well, let's
Mhm.
look at it with a slightly different lens, since this is the intuition led business podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does it look like if you're an achiever coming from your ego? And what does
Mm.
it look like if you're an achiever coming from intuition?
Ah, gosh, that's such a great question. The first thing that flashed through my mind, is coming from your ego. It's all about me. What do I get? What is it going to give to me? as opposed to when it's coming from my intuition is what impact is it going to have? Who could this help? How is this going to help? And I think that's the first thing that I think of is when I think of ego, I think of me, and it's just for the money. It's just for the notoriety. It's just to be able to kind of put the arrow in my quiver, so to speak, as opposed to when you're using your intuition, it's more about who is this going to help? How is this going to help more people, more companies, help grow others as opposed to just focused on yourself. That's what comes to me. What about for you?
Yeah, I completely agree with what everything you said. And the additional thought that came to me was, when you're using your intuition, it's not,
Yeah.
it's just what you said as well. It's also about really making sure that you're acting in the highest good.
Mm,
For others, but also for yourself. Like it's not
yeah,
just
it's
about
true.
others, it's
Yeah,
also about yourself too, like
it's true.
what you came here to do. And if if you don't have your health, what do you have? You don't
Yeah,
have
exactly.
anything. So
Yeah.
taking care of yourself. So what's in the highest good of others? What's in the highest good of myself? Is this the best thing I could be working on right now? Is
Hmm.
this the best use of my energy? I know I could do many
Yeah.
things and do them
Right.
fast, but
Yeah.
is this the best use of my energy, or would I better serve others or better serve this particular project if I were working on something different? And tuning
Hmm.
in to your intuition as well, just to
Yeah.
ask yourself that, ask yourself and really listen to the
Yeah.
answer. Like,
Yeah.
is this the best use of my time? Am I doing what my heart desires to do? And I feel like that almost rips away that tunnel vision that we talked about earlier,
Yeah,
because I
for
feel like you're
sure.
just so much more aware of other people,
Hmm.
of how this project might affect another project, how this decision might affect the team, the customers. I
Yeah.
just feel like all around, I mean, it's using your achievement as a superpower.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I like what you said too about kind of tuning into that so that sometimes we need to be good to ourselves and we need to um, achieve for our higher good because then we can help other people more and it kind of is a momentum thing.
I had a business coach tell me once, and she's now passed away, which is sad,
Mm,
but I miss her a lot. But she said every time something cool would happen, achievers sometimes want validation from other people. Like, good
yeah.
job. Like,
Yes. Right.
yay. Like that's
Absolutely.
something we want, right? We want that
Hmm.
validation. And so I would share something, and I think that's important. Everyone, if you're an
Yeah.
achiever, to have someone to share these things with. That's safe,
Absolutely.
that they
Yeah.
don't think you're bragging. It's just like, I did this. Isn't that cool?
Right. Right.
And she would do that. And it's like, you know what? More important than getting the validation from her, she would always say, take a win.
Mm,
Go take a win. And how she defined the win, or the taking a win, it could be anything from going to the coffee shop to get your favorite drink, or going for a drive, just wandering, exploring.
yeah.
Or
Yeah.
it could be buying yourself something a little nicer.
Sure.
And her point was, if you don't take the win,
Hmm.
if you're just achieving for the sake of achieving, and you're not actually, there's not some kind of tangible reward other than a pat on the head or a pat on the
Yeah.
back, good job, you know,
Right. Right.
then you come to a point where eventually you're like, what is this all for?
Yeah.
What is this all for? Do I feel fulfilled
Hmm.
or not?
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot to that. And there's a lot to being fulfilled and really making, in some ways, making that the kind of the benchmark, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. It's like using fulfillment as the ruler, the measuring tape, as opposed to your bank account or
Yeah.
your
Right.
sales goals.
Right. Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
How do
Yeah.
people measure that? How would you, do you teach people that? How would they even go about, am I fulfilled? Can I measure that on a chart?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so hard because there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of things that I do with clients that you can't really like measure it on a scale other than a subjective scale,
Yeah.
scale of 1 to 10. How fulfilled do you feel right now? And that's valid. But I think that sometimes there are things that we can't measure, objectively. It's got to be kind of come from within. And yeah, so I don't necessarily come up with like KPIs, like how are you gonna
Would it be
what's
cool
your
if you did though?
I know what's your KPI for fulfillment? What's your KPI for me
Well, you kind of
being
do that
said?
wheel of life thing, which kind of shows
True.
people where they're out of balance. And
That's
if they
true.
can, if they can rebalance, then that is a step towards fulfillment, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I mean, and one thing that I do is that when I'm working with a client, in culture work. So one of the things that I do, and this is very systematic as well, is that we will define the culture in terms of behaviors. So we'll come up with a set of behavioral statements. I call them fundamentals because they're fundamental to the success of that organization. And then we create rituals so that they can practice those. And what I mean by a ritual, it just anything that's worked into the day on a daily routine, so that helps them think about, talk about, and incorporate those behaviors into the day. And so, and there's some more to that too. But then what we'll do is we will create a survey and survey both, internally, the employees, the vendors, and um, any other stakeholders that, and we'll ask the question, how well is XYZ company living up to practicing blameless problem solving, or how well is XYZ company listening generously or being a fanatic about response time, different things. And so in that way, we can kind of measure some things about how well we're doing in a way, in something that's typically not measurable. I mean, like, how do you measure culture? Well, that's kind of one way that at least I found to try to measure it. So I know that's not what you asked, but that kind of came to my mind, and it is a way that you can measure the immeasurable in some way.
Yeah, I love that. Measure the immeasurable. Like that sounds like a good tagline right there.
I'm not
Um,
sure to say that, and so I'm glad you stumbled on it.
yeah, I mean, seriously, because that's what we're talking about here. When we're
Yeah,
achievers, we like to measure things. We
absolutely.
measure our success by how many things we ticked off our to-do list today, or how many different trophies we've
Yeah,
obtained, you know?
right, right.
And maybe the lesson for all of the achievers is to learn to measure the immeasurable.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, coming up with, yeah, finding the way to do it, finding the way to measure that immeasurable.
Yeah, and what is the immeasurable? It's those unseen, intangible parts of your life that
Yeah,
probably do create fulfillment.
yeah.
Some of them
Almost
are as
like,
meaningless rubbish, but some
yeah,
of
yeah.
it probably helps create fulfillment.
Right, right. Well, and it's funny as I was thinking about that, and as we were just kind of in that pause, the thing that came to my mind is maybe you start to count, like, how many days have you really taken off? How
Hmm.
many days have you spent in reflection or doing something that like fills you up, a hobby, what have you. I know in your book you talk about the eight, it's the rule of eight, I think is what you
Take
call it.
eight,
But
yeah.
yeah, take eight. Yeah. And like, maybe that's where we start to say, well, how many of those have I done? And maybe every quarter I'm going to take 1 day, and I'm just going to do that. I'm going to do the take eight. I don't know. There's kind of some thoughts that kind of popped through
Yeah,
my
something
head.
for you to ponder in your morning
Yeah,
ritual. Like, I mean, I'm
absolutely.
very intrigued actually by that. I'm very
Yeah.
intrigued because it's like, what are those immeasurable things? What are the things I'm not measuring right now
Hmm.
that maybe
Hmm.
I need to be?
Yeah,
for a
right.
better life, to become the best version of myself and have the best version of my life, So
Yes,
it has
absolutely.
been so fun to have you on the podcast today.
Christy, it's been a pleasure. I really have enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
You've really made me think of a lot of things, and it's been fun. It's been really
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Well, tell everyone how they can get in touch with you. And after you do that, I would love for you to share one last nugget of wisdom, just something
Sure.
quick,
Yeah.
quote, whatever you want it to be.
Sure. Okay. So you can get in touch with me either through my website, davidmcglennen.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's kind of my primary social media platform. And then as far as last little tidbit, I think that, first of all, I think I'm going to go back to the quote that you used, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I think that for me is really, it really resonates. And I think that I would just kind of reiterate that to achievers, that sometimes we do have to slow down so that we can be more effective. And I don't even want to say go faster, but I think that it may be that we can go faster, but just be more effective. And so to the extent that you can slow down and be more intentional, I think that's where you're going to make the bigger impact.
Be sure to like, comment, and share this video and hit the subscribe button. I invite you to open up your intuition and make it your new secret weapon in business by ordering my book, The Intuition Led Business, at intuitionledbusiness.com. I am Christie Turley, and I thank you.